If you can buy a property now with your home equity or as a first home buyer, why are you waiting? And if people want to buy their first house, sometimes they don't really have a plan.
There's no plan. There's no fucking plan.
They might have 50 grand in their KiwiSaver and 30 grand in savings, but they just feel like they're locked out. They might not even try. So a lot of people that can buy property don't want to, and a lot of people that own property, they're either like scared or confused or anxious, or there's something holding them back from making investment decisions. And so what happens is years and years go by where they just sit on their home equity, just pay down their mortgage, and a lot of people pay off their house, and that triggers them to think, okay, now what am I going to do, right? And what we're trying to do as mortgage advisors that are more focused on property investment, on building wealth and income through owning multiple properties, is to say, don't wait. If you can buy a property now with your home equity or as a first home buyer, why are you waiting?
Welcome, Andrew from Mortgage HQ. You know, actually why I reached out to you, obviously came across your content, but it was also because you had 198 Google reviews
Yeah.
and 4.9 star rating.
Yeah.
Can you, well, before we get into that, like, how do you do that? Like, is it just you do a great job, or you say, hey, guys, if you go with us and give us a Google review, you get $10 off, or...
Well, I'm actually quite privileged that the amount of 5-star reviews we have is actually only a small percentage of the clients that we've helped. We ask every client for a review, even if we feel like we're not going to get a 5-star review. And not everyone does it. It's just part of our automated process. It's like a week after settlement, you get an email. And I think what happens is we give a $50 restaurant voucher. And we say, hey, thanks, for choosing us. And if you don't mind, can you leave a review? We give the voucher regardless of review.
Yeah.
And it's just like a small token to say, hey, look, this is a relationship that we expect to have and hope to have over the long term. $50 is not really that much. I mean, it's just it's not many people that you give it to. You're just settling a deal. Give them, and it's hopefully they'll take someone along and they talk about their experience.
Smart.
Yeah,
it's rare and also a good feeling, because there's a few parts to that. One, they're going to talk about the good experience they had from you guys, so then maybe there's a new referral from that.
Yeah.
And then because you're giving them something at the point you ask, like Gary's jab, jab, right hook sort of mentality.
Oh, we used to just say at the start of prospective conversation and say, hey, look, if we do this for you and we do a good job, we just want two things. It's a free service. We'd like a 5-star review at the end if we deserve it. And if you're feeling generous, I'll send you a link to the whiskey we like. And, a lot of people were sending us whiskey for a while because quite a few of the guys were asking about the whiskey. And it kind of dropped off when we had a lot of whiskey because we didn't need any more. But
is it a side hustle now? You pass it on, or you just stack it up and give it to clients when they come? Or?
I've seen a few guys on LinkedIn quite a bit lately doing the whole whiskey thing. But, it's just trying to keep it fun. And when you ask for a review right at the beginning of the conversation, saying, hey, I am going to ask for a review, just helps keep front of mind, like you're trying to provide 5-star service. And 5-star service often means like just telling it like it is. Like you don't have to always be the nicest or the fastest or the smartest, but like you got to be reliable and communicate, with no BS.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people want to buy properties or get into investments that they can't afford, or the bank's just not going to approve it the way that they're wanting to get it approved. And so those can be very frustrating conversations for people that have a dream and a plan, and we're the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be the end of the relationship. Like you go to the doctor and he tells you you have cancer. It shouldn't be the end of the relationship with your doctor. It's bad news. And maybe even the doctor said, hey, we looked a year ago, we didn't see it, and we've looked this year and we've seen it. And you're going to be annoyed. But if you trust your doctor, then you keep going back.
So how do you manage those two worlds? Obviously, your business is built on writing mortgages, but sometimes you come across people where it's not right to write the mortgage for them. As you say, they can't afford it.
Yeah, so what happens in our company is, like I was saying before, we get quite a bit of inquiry, like thousands of inquiries each year. And we try to get in front of those conversations with the mortgage advisors. And typically it'll be me or one of the other guys will have a conversation. And basically we're trying to, because we've got some pretty awesome mortgage calculators on our website, there's a mortgage snapshot. So people will fill it in, might take a minute, and it will give them a bunch of answers about borrowing power, about whether it's worth restructuring or refinancing, whether they can buy another property, things like that. And that output comes to us as well, and that triggers follow-up. So if we feel like we can help, and we feel like the prospective client is going to be receptive and they want to talk, then we'll reach out, and then it's just about conversation, 5 to 10 minutes of what are your goals, what have you got planned, what challenges are going to arise, and what sort of time frame are you working towards. And then if the timing is right and we feel like it's appropriate to keep going, that's when we trigger that person to fill in an application and book a call with the advisor. So we're trying to limit the amount of conversations advisors have with people that firstly are not ready, and secondly that can't do what they want to do. And we're trying to point people to educational content and information that will help them achieve the goals they have. A lot of people don't have financial goals. They just want to maybe pay down their mortgage, and that's it. They haven't thought about income in retirement. They haven't. And if people want to buy their first house, sometimes they don't really have a plan. They don't really have a time frame. They're just saying, they might have 50 grand in their KiwiSaver and 30 grand in savings, but they just feel like they're locked out and they might not even try. So, a lot of people that can buy property don't want to. And a lot of people that own property and don't have an investment vehicle, they're either like scared or confused or anxious, or there's something holding them back from making investment decisions. And so what happens is years and years go by where they just sit on their home equity, just pay down their mortgage. And a lot of people pay off their house, and that triggers them to think, okay, now what am I going to do? Right? And what we're trying to do as mortgage advisors that are more focused on property investment, on building wealth and income through owning multiple properties, is to say, don't wait. If you can buy a property now with your home equity or as a first home buyer, why are you waiting? No, time in the market, as you know, is very important. And if you wait a year or 2 or 3 years, let's say you're buying, use round numbers for easy maths, $1 million property. And on average, in the Auckland market, it's been 5% capital gains for the last 10 years. And you can project that out, that hopefully maybe it'll be around at least 3% capital gains in Auckland for the next 10 years. So if you wait a year to buy a property, it's going to be 30 grand or more next year. And so if you've only got 80 grand of savings, 30 grand extra to pay is a lot. Why wait? And it's the same for people that have a lot of home equity. They might have a $500,000 mortgage and $1.2 million house, so they've got 700 grand of home equity. But if you're not investing that or treating it as an investment like launch pad, you've got to think, okay, what am I going to do with my savings and my money when I pay off this mortgage? What is going to be my income generating asset? And shares are great, and shares that make up a part of diligent person's portfolio, and you want to spread the risk a bit. Shares, whether it's an index or individual stocks, is for sure, but you can't leverage off it. And we've all seen the volatility in the last 10 years and beyond. Like, I'm lucky I was born in 87, so I haven't seen that 87 crash. Like we've seen a few little blips, but the volatility and the lack of ability to just really generate a lot of income from your share portfolio, unless you have a really big pie, like, you're talking at least $1 million, if not $2 or $3 million to generate enough decent income from shares. So we're just trying to say, hey, if you've got 100 grand of usable equity, you can leverage off that and use it to buy a $500,000 property that's going to generate you income for life. Yes, there's going to be difficult decisions like what should I buy and where should I buy and how should I manage it, and is this going to take up a lot of my time? And then you manage those stresses. You say, I'm going to get help. Somebody can help me choose what to buy. I'm going to get a property manager so I don't get calls that I don't know what to do. And it's just about keeping an open mind that if I have no investment vehicle, then how am I going to get money? You know, a freehold house is great, but it doesn't pay you unless you rent out the rooms.
That's a good call. I mean, we sort of go a different. Well, we have clients that have rental property, and we have clients that have managed funds as a means to fund that income. But you're right. The great benefit of property is you're leveraging money you don't have, and you can potentially leapfrog in a direction that's quite powerful. How much? Like a decent income, let's say 120 grand or whatever easy maths you can do in your head, of like how much of a portfolio would you need to fund a decent income in retirement, like of obviously property?
Yeah, there's one client that has been working with us since 2016, and she is on a 5-figure income. So definitely under 100 grand. She does a lot of overtime. And when she first came through, she just wanted to get a better deal on her existing mortgage. She just had one property. But now she has 5 properties. And so she, at the very beginning, couldn't afford to buy an expensive investment property. I think her max was like $250,000. And that was really stretching it. And it had to be like a high yield property. So she ended up buying in Hastings for $250,000 or thereabouts. And it was $320 a week rental income. And she just repeated that process, 3 or 4 more times in the last 5 years. And because of capital gains and because of selling one property and buying another duplex property, her portfolio is now worth $2.8 million, and she has more than $1.2 million of equity. Now, she, single income, less than 100 grand. She just works really hard, listens to advice, and takes action. So you don't need the big income. You just need to make sure you understand the constraints of your situation. And if you can only buy a $200,000 or $300,000 property, then it makes setting the filters on Trade Me and real estate much easier because there's going to be less to choose from. You just got to be quick and form the habit of looking at listings and being involved until you get a transaction done.
Well, what's your advice for that example? For example, saying example a few times there, is the change in legislation with the interest costs. You used to be able to offset it, so she's obviously done quite well to pay it off. Is there things you're recommending for clients at the moment? Like, are they doing interest only, or are they selling off? But then you got the bright line test. Like, what are you?
Yeah, for established investors, those changes won't be as impactful as it would be for new investors. So the established investors, a lot of them would have been factoring in 5 to 10% interest rates anyway, and now we're down 2%, 2.5%. So, and a lot of them have had these experienced investors capital gains of, in the last 10 years, property prices more than doubled for sure for most of them. So the experienced and established investors have had a huge capital gain, and cash flow has gone through the roof because of their interest expense dropping so much.
Got it.
So established investors are just going to be fine. New investors definitely need to factor in the lack of interest rate deductibility. The interest cost deductibility is going to affect people to the tune of like $3 to $5 grand a year. Rents will go up to cover that loss. And you can be sure of one thing is governments come and go. So even if Labor does rubber stamp this change, they may not. It's just an idea at the moment. If they get another term, and even if they get another term after that, you can be sure that government will switch back eventually. And whether it's Act or National, they might reverse those changes. And in which case, if you've been buying properties and wearing that burden of not having the deductibility and it still works for you, and then that gets lifted from you, your cash flow might double overnight through a reversal of that change. And in that time, what has happened is property prices have gone up, rents have gone up to meet the extra expense for investors, probably a bit more inflation than what has happened in the last couple of years. So if you've got debt with the inflation that's projected to happen, and you've been buying assets, when those rules reverse in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time, you're going to be in a really, really strong position. If you wait until the rules change back Say you're saying, look, with interest cost deductibility, I'm just not going to invest. I'm going to wait till they change it back, and then I will. Then you're going to miss out on 5 or 10 or 15 years of gains, of income, of surplus income that can be put on your own mortgage or into other investments. Like, you look in America, in the different states, they got way more taxes than we do. And in Australia, they got duties and other taxes that we don't have. So you just got to, okay, you can complain about it, but then get on with it. It's okay, yeah, it's a couple grand that you're going to not get, but no, keep going. It's property is still such an obvious investment vehicle, even without that. And if not property, then what? Right? If you're going to invest in businesses, great. What businesses are you going to invest in? Private companies that are local to you, that are going to pay you income? Great. Get out there and do it. Maybe that's your investment vehicle. Are you going to invest in shares? Okay. What are you going to invest in? Are you going to use an advisor or do it yourself? But like we said before, you probably need to get to $1 million or $2 million invested in shares to get any real decent income or return that's reliable from it. So if you don't invest in property, there's not much else. And heaven forbid you be looking at cryptocurrencies or speculating, so to speak. If you do that, it's not a surefire way. Now, property to me and to our clients is one of the only surefire ways to get leverage and get returns over the long term.
Yeah, the leverage is the main point of difference. Like, for example, managed fund, you get between 5 and 7%.
Yeah.
So match is similar to the capital growth of what you might get with the property, but obviously you're making gains on money that you don't have.
Yeah, yeah. And
rental income as well.
One of my friends bought a property off the plans a year or two ago for 1.1 mil, saw a good deal, and he's decided that he wants to move, and he's selling it for 1.6. So he probably put 10% down, 110,000, and that's turned into 600,000 of cash with no tax. Now that's an owner-occupied tactic, but you can invest by changing owner-occupied properties. Now, there's a lot of people that buy a family home, renovate it, and when that property has served its purpose and you decide it's time to move again, you can get a big gain like that. And maybe buying a property and adding a minor dwelling or adding a bedroom is going to give you the income for life that you're really looking for. Now, I don't think it's shares or property. I think it's shares and property. But you just need to make sure that you assess the order and where to allocate capital first and to what proportions so that you can get your capital base up. Now, property is a really good way, if you're intelligent about it, to get your capital base up. And if you get $1 million of cash, then by all means, chuck it in a managed fund or into some shares and watch it compound and don't touch it. But only when you don't need it.
Well, yeah, you can have a managed fund and use it like ongoing. Like if you're going to set and leave it, then obviously you can go more aggressive, more volatility, and it'll compound over time. Well, what yield do you think is a fair representation of what you could get? So you've got this person, they're trying to get 120,000 income. Do they need $2 million worth of property? 3, 1?
Yeah. If you want to get 80,000 passive, then you really need to get well over 2 mil of property, maybe even up to 3 mil.
Okay.
And obviously that means debt.
Yeah.
So that's what catches people is they get nervous about getting into debt. And so they might have $500K mortgage, and they see that creating 80 to 100,000 of passive income is going to require them to take on like another 2 mil of mortgage debt. And that sounds like astronomical. It's like, that can be scary. And that's where spreadsheets are really important. You can show that everything's cash flow positive. And if it's not, then it's not missing by much. If you're being very conservative about how many weeks you're going to not have tenants and things like that. Some property investment advisors will be very generous with their capital gains calculations. You know, I've heard of some, and I use the bunny ears advisors using 7% capital gains on their spreadsheets, which I think is pretty dangerous. But even if you factor 1 to 3% capital gains, which is a lot less than what has been happening, and you can cash flow positively through the next 10-year cycle, then the spreadsheets become incredibly helpful. And when you work with a mortgage advisor, that's how you're able to get the interest-only lending, and you're able to get it for 5 years. Not in all cases, but that's generally the aim. And if required and if accepted at the time by the bank, you can reapply for interest-only lending. You don't need. Most people still think about mortgages as principal and interest. And principal and interest definitely, on your family home, pay down the debt there. But when you've got 2.25% interest rates and you can borrow $1 million for like 20 grand and generate 30, 40, 50 grand of income from that $1 million, you're silly to dismiss it quickly. It's good to think about, why would this be a good idea? Can I even do it if I want to? And then if you can do it and you still think it's a good idea, then why are you not? I bought a property in Sandringham recently, and it generates well over $1,000 a week, and it's like 20, 30 grand of cash flow positive. When you're using interest-only lending.
Yeah.
So all of the properties that you're looking at are cash flow positive if you don't pay too much. And that's the thing, is like, you don't have, if you see a property doesn't earn the return that you need or want, you don't have to buy that one at that price. You can find something in Hamilton or in Taranaki, or you can find a property that yields at the level that you need, and you can sacrifice a bit on the location side to make sure that you can sleep at night.
Makes sense. So you did the 2 million. It's like 4% pretty much. Is that tax paid and maintenance and insurance and?
Yeah, after tax. Yeah.
After tax 4. What do you think it costs to maintain a house? Like 0.5, 1. I don't have these opportunities to have it. People that specialize in it.
And that's where when you compare different property types, if you're going to buy a new build property and you get the 10-year master builder guarantee, and within 1 year they'll come back and fix things, then obviously there's going to be less maintenance. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to meet the healthy home standards right off the bat. You might have to do your homework there. But buying a new build property means less deposit required. So you can, if you don't have the equity, you can leverage a bit more, and it means less maintenance. However, if you buy a new build, generally speaking, you're not going to have the big land size. So what happens is a developer will come along, there'll be a big house on a big section, and they'll put 10 on it. And then they'll sell those 10 as if it was one on that big section. So you might be paying $1 million and only getting a tenth of that section size that you would have beforehand. Yes, you get a brand new house, but the cost may not be obvious at the beginning, because capital gains is generally on the land size. So I think you've got to be careful just looking at new builds thinking this is so easy and this is so great. You've got to factor in the fact that if you have 1,000 square meters in Auckland with a big old house, the capital gains is probably going to be a lot better than if you have 150 square meters in Auckland and a brand new house. It might take a while for that impact to become obvious, but I've definitely got that bias in my mind now of thinking, it's great to have a low maintenance property, but at what cost? And these kind of nuance factors is what you'll talk about with your mortgage advisor. When you go to get advice from someone that's saying to buy a new build property, you've got to understand how they're being remunerated. And when you work with a mortgage advisor that's not remunerated on what you buy, they're only remunerated on what you borrow, you also got to factor in, am I asking the barber if I need a haircut? That famous quip. You just got to make sure that you have the knowledge in your own head enough that you're not going to get duped into doing something silly. Because it's very easy as a professional, mortgage advisor, investment advisor, real estate advisor, to become so biased by what you're selling that you think it's so great that you miss the flaws of it.
Yeah. That's why you're on here, mate.
Yeah.
Try not to get biased.
And so for anyone that is thinking about property investment, I just say read widely, listen to the podcasts and watch the videos, and you've got to be able to argue for and against every idea that you have. No, you've got to be able to say, new build is such a great idea, here's all the reasons. New build is a terrible idea, here's all the reasons. Should I buy an existing property and renovate it, add a bedroom, tidy up the kitchen? That's a great idea, here's all the reasons. And vice versa, here's all the reasons why I shouldn't do it. And once you feel comfortable assessing the numbers and talking about those kinds of things, then you get an advantage over other investors who are just like, what I'm seeing a lot of, which does worry me, is investors treating property buying like e-commerce. Like, need to buy a property, click, bought a property, sweet, don't have to worry about it anymore. Like, odds are some of those people are going to regret that, doing it that way, especially if you never ever go to that property. People in Auckland buying something on the outskirts of Christchurch or Cambridge or Hastings or whatever, like, you've never been there. Are you trusting the word of someone that's going to make a lot of money selling you this? You just got to be careful.
So you look at intent, motivation, and you prepare yourself with knowledge. How do you upskill? Where can people go to learn? Obviously, you've got your mortgage calculator, you create content. Is there someone else that you learn from? Or
Yeah, we obviously got a lot on our YouTube. It's just youtube.com/mortgagehq. Got like 100 videos up there. Bigger Pockets is a American website, biggerpockets.com, and they've got definitely the most successful property podcast.
Is it relevant still?
Extremely relevant.
Okay.
So obviously it's Americanized, but the tactics and the understanding of pitfalls is really awesome. Like the guy Blandon Turner that runs it, he's got like 2,000 units, and they're very much giving a lot of knowledge away for free that is definitely not going to hurt. So I try to encourage all of the team, definitely, is don't listen to music in the car. Don't listen to music at the gym if you can handle it. There's so much free content that you're never, ever, ever going to get through all of the free content.
Yeah.
Like you almost don't need to pay for advice until you're like really ready.
Yeah.
If you haven't done the work to learn. No, the point that I wrote down here is like a financial six pack. Like if you see somebody that's in really good shape, like most of the time it's not an accident.
Yeah.
Like it's diet, it's habits on going to the gym, it's research on what sort of workouts and techniques. It's the same with investing. Like the people that have done really well in investing, generally it's not a mistake. It's because they've done the research. They've got habits of looking at different types of investments. Their friends are investors. So if you're not in that circle about talking about money and talking about property, then you need to find people to talk about it with. One of the points I wanted to talk about today was avoiding silly mistakes. Like buying property, relatively speaking, is pretty easy. Buying shares, especially with Sharesies and Hatch and all those programs now, it's pretty easy to spend your money and invest your money these days. But what catches a lot of people out is making real silly mistakes. And I was just listening in the office today. Like one of the clients was talking about selling a property. They got a lot of debt, and that debt is cross-secured between their portfolio. They wanted to sell one of their properties to free up some cash. The trouble is, if they sell that property, the bank is going to ask for all of the proceeds of the sale. And the client didn't really understand that. So if that person didn't talk to one of our advisors, they would have sold their $1.5 million property thinking they were going to get, say, $1 million of cash, but the bank would have taken all the money. And so what ends up happening is they would have had one less property and way less debt, which is not what they wanted. They want to keep the debt. They want to keep growing their portfolio. And so if you have cross-secured properties and you're not getting advice before hitting that sell button, that's a big mistake because you won't be able to borrow that money again. And like another really big mistake is getting advice from non-experts. So if you ask a real estate agent, or you ask a lawyer, or you ask, even if you ask an accountant for an investment advice, by all means, listen. But just be careful, because they all got their own agenda. They might not necessarily actually know what they're talking about, even if they have confidence when they say it. I wouldn't ask the barista for a haircut. They might have really good insights about what hairstyle I should get, but no, go to the barber when I need a haircut. And so what happens is a lot of people get advice from family or from friends or from real estate agents about investing or about selling, and it's well mean, but it's not good advice. And that's just what we're just really trying to help people not make silly decisions.
Well, on that note, like obviously the financial six-pack, I like it. It's a good analogy. We also had a guest on before. You'd say, don't go to get advice from someone you wouldn't normally go to. Not in the sense of like don't go to an expert, but more in the sense of go to someone that you would expect to get the right advice from. Yeah. But I'd be curious, like, so, there's a big mixed bag. Some people are like, okay, why don't I just go to the bank? Like, why would I go to a mortgage? Like, what can a mortgage broker actually do? Like, what's the things you can pivot and utilize? And
well, what's not commonly known is there's quite a bit of variation between what the banks can do.
Okay.
So if you go to your existing bank and you want to buy a property, they might say, yep, you can buy a $600,000 property. What they won't tell you is if you walk across the road to the different bank, they might give you $1 million, which is very important, especially because you're setting your budget. Now, the people that work in the banks, they're not really allowed to give you advice about properties and about mortgage structure and things like that. Doesn't mean they won't. They're not really supposed to.
Yeah.
And you just got to accept that banks are really, really awesome at lending money. They're good at looking after money. They're good with credit cards. They're really good at a lot of things that they do. But the odds are the person you're talking to is not going to be the person you're talking to in 2 or 3 years' time. And they're really good people that work at the bank. They get promoted or they go out on their own. So if you want consistency working with the same people, mortgage advisor is a good choice there. If you actually want to get advice, mortgage advisors actually give advice, whereas bankers generally don't. Okay. They'll be able to tell you about what rates are on offer, and they might quietly give you insight on what they think is 1 year or 2 year or 3 years best. But they're definitely not going to tell you about tax and ownership structures. They're not going to tell you about walk across the road and you get a better offer. They're not going to tell you the hacks that mortgage advisors commonly know about. If you put this property at that bank and this property at that bank, that means you can borrow this much. Split banking is a hot topic in the mortgage space at the moment because of the rule changes around the interest deductibility and potential rule changes about debt-to-income ratios and about interest-only lending. Mm-hmm. So, do you want to work with someone that works in the branch or that handles 100 inquiries a week but just works at the bank and not remunerated in any which way to focus on your deal over anyone else's? Or do you want to work with like a highly experienced mortgage advisor that specifically focuses on property investment and only gets paid on success? It's like kind of a no-brainer.
There is a caveat to that. Obviously, with your competitors, not necessarily saying you, but so most models I see in the mortgages, it's free. So there's an underlying trail or commission, or like how do you know that they're not necessarily just recommending the one that they get the best price from? Yep.
So if a mortgage advisor is suggesting that you switch banks or that you specifically use a lender, if you don't trust their advice, then you've got to question why you're working with them. The mortgage advisor, their duty is to explain to you why this specific lender